Hey guys, it's Tripl-L and now let's talk Shokugeki no Soma chapter 267, Advent of the Dark Chefs. Okay, actually that was in the title, but I just felt like we need a Yu-Gi-Oh like title here. Let me just look at the chapter title because then we can start this properly. Yes, chapter 267, Soma and Megumi's Hot Spring Case Files Part 3, The Midnight Chefs. Actually, you know what? The Midnight Chefs is a pretty good. It's nice, it's mysterious. Actually, all things considered, I actually like the title of the new antagonist, the Midnight Chefs. That's pretty slick, man. I like it. I think it's a bit goofy considering that these are guys that are just out there in the world cooking and shit for criminals and all that kind of good stuff. But you know what? I'm sure that the guy who's the head of the Midnight Chefs either has a stylish personality or that's just what people decided to call them. Either way, it's a stylish name. I really like it. I think it fits with the crime motif. It's definitely something I would see in a caper type manga series, so I'm pretty happy with it. Anyway, guys, hey, let's get into the chapter. This one is the one that pretty much drops all the pretense and we just go back straight into, well, not straight, it's more, we're going back to like something more simple, that being just confrontations that are resolved with Shokugekis. We're going back to that. So, like always, I'm gonna nitpick, and truthfully, there was so many times that I wanted to nitpick in this chapter, and then so many times that I just snapped my fingers and just said, okay, you win this one, author, because the majority of the time the author covered his tracks on this one, so a lot of the nitpicking points are gone, there's like, maybe there were 6 points that I wanted to nitpick on, I think, and then maybe only 1 point really stays, and it's like the weakest nitpick too. So it's a pretty good chapter in that regard. If the author can cover up his tracks, then he's doing a good enough job. Like, one of the big points was when these chefs were talking and they were like all about the underworld, like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, okay, man, if they're underworld chefs, like, these are kind of people who are probably gonna die if they screw up at some point, because it's the underworld, right? Like, that's a pretty fast way of setting it up. And then the chef himself, what do we want to call him? The tourist. He points out, oh yeah, Shokugeki is so easy, man. Like, in our world, it's not uncommon for us to die. And it's like, okay, yeah, all right. The author's doing a pretty good job on that one. But all things considered, once that line came out, all I'm thinking is, all right, we're halfway there to Yu-Gi-Oh, right? We're halfway there. This is like pretty much the equivalent of Shadow Games, or if you watch Yu-Gi-Oh GX, this is pretty much the equivalent of duels where you get shocked and maybe you lose your life. Pretty much, when you're having your mode of conflict, of non-violent conflict, leading to death, yeah, you're halfway there to Yu-Gi-Oh. All we need are the dual monsters. Damn it. Come on, just give me that. You want to risk people's lives? Well, let's go with... Actually, we're not risking people's lives yet. But I do wonder if things will escalate to that point, since we're dealing with people who risk their lives in general, apparently. I do wonder if we're going to end up going there. That'd be interesting. That would definitely be... If we go that direction, we're pretty much... If we put the stakes that high, we're pretty much going into the territory of cooking means big business, or like, yeah, cooking is serious business, and we're going into the territory of the shows that take things very seriously, like Yu-Gi-Oh. The ones I'm thinking of are all like the card game ones that end up having to put people's lives on the line. But we're going in that direction, I think, if we ever bring that in as a condition. Would Shokugeki no Soma do that? Well, I don't know. Shokugeki no Soma exists in a magazine where a lot of the other conflicts usually end in death. Wait, let's turn that back around. Do they end in death? Naruto would end in death. One Piece would end in death if it's the villains doing it to the heroes, maybe, depending on how you're feeling. If you're a mook, you'd definitely end in death. Black Clover maybe would end in death. What other? No, Promised Neverland definitely ends in death. Yeah, okay, so it's a bit of a toss-up because it's still a magazine aimed for teenagers and maybe like preteens. So whether or not Shokugeki no Soma decides to go that dark of a route, nah. Nah, probably wouldn't. Then again, Yu-Gi-Oh at one point also ran in Shonen Jump, and Yu-Gi-Oh definitely went into the Shadow Realm for that one. Or I think in Japan it was just they went to hell. Anyway, you know, I'm getting sidetracked, but it's just like the idea of like you have these people who are bringing in the death element into things. If we ever get a Shokugeki where like someone's getting a shock collar attached to their neck, that's gonna be pretty metal, man. If we go anywhere in that direction, it'd be very interesting. So, you know, moving aside from like just the cool possibilities of people taking cooking way too seriously in this world, there was just one nitpick that survived. And it's not really a nitpick, I think it's just characters being stupid. It was specifically the scene where Megumi's asking, how could they find out about the Shokugeki? And so, like, yeah, it's... This makes it seem like the Shokugeki is it makes it seem like it's a well-guarded secret of Totsuki, when everyone and their mothers who knows anything about food knows that's not the case, right? So like this question here, I think, and like a follow-up question that Irina had later on is just, you know, they make it seem like these people found out about the super secret thing that no one should know, and it's like, not really. I mean, think about it. A lot of the big names in Totsuki, or sorry, a lot of the big sponsors or the big people in gourmet, they know about Totsuki. They naturally know about the Shokugeki system. It's not that hard to imagine that people just sat down with each other and they gossiped and say like, oh yeah, did you know this school in Japan has like this really cool system where they like make their chefs better? They do this thing called the Shokugeki, and then you know, like they just have a fun time and everything revolves around the Shokugeki. You know, like that's not that hard to imagine. Especially when this town in particular, you have the townsfolk talking about how much they care about Totsuki, right? So like questions like this are questions that drum up suspense, but they're really stupid questions because it's just simply people network. That's all it is. Everyone from Totsuki, no, it gets even worse when you consider the international effects of Totsuki. People from Totsuki travel the world. It's not that inconceivable for people to talk about Totsuki to other people in other places. Like Shinomiya. Shinomiya goes to France. He has a Shokugeki somewhere, and then maybe his little like minion chefs, they'll go out and they'll just like gossip and like talk about like how cool that system is. It's not that hard. Like word of mouth it's not a well-kept secret. It's not a trade secret or anything like that. So that's the only thing. It's just a stupid question to ask because it's very simply just networking. This is what happened. This is why you shouldn't network. You know, it's because too many people talk too much and then people find out about how your school does things. It's like, it's not a well-guarded secret. That's just, if you're anyone big in the gourmet world, I think you have a right, or you probably know about the Shokugeki. It's not that hard. In the chapter though, they made a connection though that the Shokugeki isn't isolated to Totsuki. It's a system in Japan. This is a very interesting point because it fights against the question that Megumi asked and associates it to all of Japan. So like at that moment when the guy's talking about it, it invalidates this Megumi's condition of he doesn't seem like a graduate of Totsuki, right? So he like expands the sorry, I keep getting confused with Totsuki and Shokugeki. He expands the Shokugeki to the whole country, and the reason that this makes sense, mind you, I think he's the one that's overreaching with that statement, but the reason it would make sense in the Shokugeki no Soma world is because Totsuki has so much influence that the chances are that every chef or like every chef that's worth anything knows about the Shokugekis and therefore would act under them. Like it's a bit like the Shokugeki is an ironclad rule of Totsuki. I don't think it's an ironclad rule of Japan, but like the guy says it here, he just tackles or he attacks the people based on their pride, and their pride is what leads to their downfall. So actually, I think that's clever. I think that was a clever way of doing it. And like I said last chapter, the author did a good job of establishing why this particular hot spring town would know about the Shokugeki. They have ties to Totsuki. So if it's in a form of respect that they would use their system, it actually makes total sense that the guy is taking advantage of it here. That said, I do think it's a bit shaky because like ultimately what would resolve this problem is if people just don't give into their pride and just tell the guy to fuck off, right? That would solve all the problems, because the thing is, the guy said he was the one that was just trying to egg them on into it. So we're pretty much going into confrontations that are entirely revolving around people's prides here, because Totsuki's the only place that really has to adhere to the system, not the rest of Japan. The rest of Japan's just doing it because they like really like Totsuki. So that's very interesting. There's no problem with that. It's just it just makes Shokugeki no Soma like kind of similar to other shows like Yu-Gi-Oh, where people just get into these confrontations for reasons like pride or other little stupid little things, unless you're going into the really dark arcs where it's like, okay, people are gonna die if I don't duel. It's pretty much kind of going there. So it's just, some people might find that simplistic. I think that's just like, you just have to kind of reorient what to expect from Shokugeki no Soma. But because we're still so early on, it's hard to see how these things are gonna work, right? Because I think the challenge is you're having people who could potentially bring in these bigger punishments. So now you have to justify, or you have to play along with why anyone in their right mind would say yes to a cooking battle that might end up where you might end up losing 5 of your fingers, right? Like, I mean, if the author wants to go dark like that, that'd be pretty interesting, but like, I don't think we need that kind of world in Shokugeki no Soma. Anyway, it's interesting that they're bringing in the idea of illegal chefs. I think that's totally interesting. When I read the spoilers, I thought it was kind of goofy, but when you have them talking about, just chefs who are catering like really illegal events, like maybe a meeting between mafia bosses, that's, they're talking about things like that. I thought that was, that's cool, like that's a realistic thing, and I would like to see that explored. But I do wonder what kind of ridiculousness are we gonna see from these people. This guy also had like some rhetoric about him being a king and all kinds of stuff, and it's like, all right, whatever. Like, really, I think it's simplistic. I think he is a caricature of a villain. I think he's being over exaggerated because we needed a villain for the introductory arcs. That's fine, not a big problem. That's just a standard technique that we've seen before. Not a big deal. So far, I think that these guys could be more reasonable villains than Azami, because Azami was just kind of all over the place. And so by the end of the chapter, we also have Megumi standing up and pointing something out to him. And now, I'm not gonna lie, the moment that Megumi actually raises her hand, I thought that was pretty freaking badass. Like, no lie, that was a pretty badass moment for Megumi. So I'm pretty excited to see if she's just gonna like challenge him to Shokugeki right there. I also like the calm demeanor with which she just kind of like stood up to this guy. So very excited for her. That said, I feel like if there's ever going to be a sacrificial pawn to establish how strong someone is, it's probably going to be Megumi. But that's probably going to be like really late into the arc if they decide to give Megumi more Shokugekis. What record does Megumi have for Shokugekis in general? Like, she usually gets 1 or 2 for most arcs. Yeah, I think she usually gets 1 or 2 unless it's a tournament. So we can at least expect 2 from her, I think. So we'll have to see how the author decides to treat her. Now that she has that Elite 10 seat, like, she should realistically get less losses or losses. Sorry, that was a weird word. Less losses, just because she needs to keep that seat. Then again, now that we're in Totsuki's new Soma Grand Order, and now that we know Shokugekis are like pretty much a thing people have to accept, otherwise they're just wimps. It probably would make sense if Megumi's like being challenged to Shokugekis pretty often, because if she's the 10th seat, most people would think that they could probably take the seat from her, since she's technically the weakest in the Elite 10. So if she's still in the Elite 10 on all this point and still accepting Shokugekis, she's like reasonably good. But it would be kind of funny if Megumi was actually way further up in the list, like if she was the 4th seat initially and then she got beat down into 10th. That'd be pretty hilarious. I'd see that happening, especially when you consider that the ones fighting for like the 4th one right now are Hayama, Ryo, and Alice, yeah, I could see those three in particular like beating Megumi down at the 10th. But actually, I want to know like what seat she initially had. But good for her for staying in the 10th seat for all this time. Like we can assume she's definitely being challenged often. So good stuff. I'm excited to see this. I have total confidence that Megumi's going to be able to beat this guy down. But that said, all this guy's going to receive is just a deathless loss. Like, this is probably going to be a walk in the park for him, aside from his ego getting crushed. Anyway, I'm super excited, guys. I'm super excited about this, mostly because I want to see what the Midnight Chefs want to do, and I do hope that their villainy gets a bit more characterized. I don't want to just be like ego trips all the time, but yeah, let's call it there, guys. Let me know what you thought down below, and till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.